Welcome in Rose City to Soccer Made in Portland. Ryan Clark here with Chris Reifer on this beautiful Wednesday morning here in the Rose City. Temperatures are ticking up. They're selling THC products at the Portland Pickles games. Everything's just changing in an exciting and beautiful way.
High times in Portland.
High times in the city of Portland. So Chris, what have you been up to these last couple of weeks? What's on your mind lately beyond the world of footy?
Oh, we're in full wedding planning season. SZN. It is.
Same.
It is. Yeah, it is my catering era, as it were.
You guys are picking your caterer out right now.
No, we're fine tuning things. We're 10 days out now, so
Oh, wow.
it's down to brass tacks.
Okay.
We're just like in the trenches. It's hand to hand. So that's where we're at.
Every minute little detail. I've got friends that were in that range. We aren't in that range yet. We're not getting married till October, but
October, yeah.
But the last 2 weeks is just like bunker down time for everybody.
Yep.
You forget a million different details. There's last minute little costs that you're just like, shoot, like didn't expect this, but
yeah,
that's part of the territory.
That's right. But we're also very excited. It's going to be super fun. By and large, it has gone great. So overall, very positive about the experience. But there are definitely times where it feels like kind of being in the thick of it. But
Yeah.
if somebody needs help putting together a seating chart for any kind of function or event, shoot me a DM. I got some skills.
Some serious expertise in that department. Now, I soon will delve into that myself. In speaking about organization, the Portland Thorns have been rather organized as of late.
Yeah, in some ways more than others.
Yes, certainly. And we can talk more about the
others,
the other ways once we get through the
soccer show first. It'll become a clown show later.
Yeah, we'll talk clowning later on. But as in terms of soccer, Thorns 2 straight shutouts, 2 straight clean sheets, I should say. A 1-0 win over the Courage, and then a 0-0 draw with the Reign. Despite the missing Sophia Smith in that game, the Thorns were able to pull a result out on the road against their rivals, which I think is a testament to the structure, to the organization that they are firmly locked into right now, especially considering not only were they missing Smith, they were also missing Sam Coffey, who is an anchor on
and
both
Olivia
ends.
Moultrie.
Yeah, and
of course
Moultrie.
Morgan Weaver. I mean, that's 4 of their sort of first choice front 6, I think you'd have to say.
Yeah, exactly. And without those players, they still get a result. I think an impressive one for Rob Gale and company, trying to get back in the winning category, though, with their next game on Sunday against the Current. Hot team coming into town, so that's going to be exciting. Sophia Smith will play. We'll talk more about the reason why that is the case, even though it might have seemed like it would not be the case.
It seemed like it would be the case, and then we found out that apparently it was in doubt for some time. And now, again, we'll talk about the clown show in a minute.
Yes, but in terms of the soccer, look, things are looking pretty good for the Thorns with the Olympics on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we've seen over the course of the last couple of weeks is really the maturity of the game model that Rob Gale has instilled in this Thorns team. And we've talked a lot over the course of the last 18 months or so about how the Thorns at times were really naive in the way they were managing games, and they were really naive in their approach in game states that called for being a little bit more sensible. And everything that Gale has done since he took the helm has been about sort of instilling that sensibility that they lacked. And I think that has been a real game changer for the Thorns, that has really allowed them to take control of games and make sure results don't get away. And that's what we've seen, I think, over the course of these last couple of weeks. That game against the Courage, again, it wasn't the most dynamic attacking performance the Thorns have had. I thought by the second half they really started to get on top of the game. They found the goal through the penalty, VAR correctly giving the penalty. They're like no problems there. And then I think they just did a pretty good job of shutting the game down. That's what you want to do. The Courage had a couple chances. They had a few minutes after the goal where they looked okay, even being down a player. But by and large, the Thorns did a really nice job of making sure that was it. I thought the Thorns, frankly, were gonna pile on and make it go 2-0, 3-0, especially with the way the Courage press going down a player is just really bad news for them. And given the game state and all of that, I thought there were going to be a lot of opportunities. There weren't, and it was fine because you get the same number of points if you win 1-0 as if you win 2-0 or 3-0, right? And it was never particularly in doubt as to whether they would get those 3 points. And so, it was a deserved 3 points. The Thorns were the better team. They created the better of the chances, and that was that. And they defended really well. Fast forward another week, and they had that avalanche of absences, which, I mean, look, there's not a team in NWSL that could have absences of that depth and still be even remotely close to the same team that they would like to be, right? But nonetheless, going on the road in a rivalry game, granted against a Reign team that has been rough, had a really bad first half of the year.
Yeah, they have their own problems to work
out. They got
sure.
A lot of them. Yeah, they've got a lot of them. But it's nonetheless a road game and a rivalry game. Down that number of players, I don't think you would have said the Thorns were favorites to even come out of that with a point. And yet they controlled what they can control, which was keeping things as clean and as tight as possible. It was a really sensible way to approach the game. And I thought they did a really good job of it. It's not like there were a ton of chances for the Reign as the game went along. There were very few. And that's a huge credit to the Thorns players and to the coaching staff for preparing them in a way to get a result out of a game that they faced some pretty significant headwinds in. So in terms of the stuff on the field, I mean, I think this is looking like a really compelling team right now. And it's looking like the compelling team that we thought they were turning into before the Pride game. I think if you look at this team now, they're a problem when it comes to late in the season in the playoffs, right? They're not a draw that anybody wants to have. Especially, I don't think we have great detail on this, but especially if you're looking at the possibility of Morgan Weaver coming back late in the year, that team's a problem. And I think it's a really interesting matchup now against a KC Current team that has feasted on teams that let games get stretched and let games get out of control. That is exactly what the Thorns have doubled down in the last few weeks to make sure they don't do. And so it's a really, really interesting game coming up this weekend with the Current coming to Portland in the return trip from the season opener to have two of the best teams in the league face off. Tune in.
Yeah, that's going to be a fun one. I'll be out there for that one, so that'll be an exciting matchup to watch for sure on Sunday afternoon. You talked, I think you made a really good point about the progression of the last 18 months and the I love that mug for the YouTube viewers. Chris Reifer held up a mug that said "I'm speaking," which, I mean, when you're drinking out of it and holding it up to a camera, that's not true, obviously, but it is pretty funny. There's just a little irony there for the YouTubers. But back to the point, the progression of the last 18 months. You talk about managing game states for the Thorns. They were a team that, whether they were up or whether they were trying to hold on for a point or a solid result last season, despite their record, despite the success that they had, it always felt like at times they were walking on a tightrope, and that they were dealing with their issues at the back that left games open. Teams would be able to counter and press on them in ways that, opened the game up and made it difficult for them to defend in space. And we talked about that all last year, and it was such a concurrent theme week after week. And it seems that, under Gale, it's been a hard correction in that department, and the ability to not only defend in space and defend consistently, but to manage game states in such a way where you give yourself a chance to win every game out. And for all of their games under Gale, with the exception of that Pride game, which, you faced a juggernaut in Barbara Banda in that first half, and it was 2-0 for that reason. with the exception of that game, they've been very, very sound, and they've been a team that, for all of the challenges they faced this season with injury, with suspension, with drama and everything else in these games, they've weathered the storm and I think righted the ship in a way that that should give Thorns fans hope for the second half of the season coming back from the Olympics. Now, obviously, there's going to be the challenge of reintegrating those players. We saw it during the World Cup year. That was a big challenge for the Thorns, given the volume of key contributors that they had in that tournament. It's going to be the same thing for the Olympics, but most teams have that sort of problem in the NWSL, given the talent level. So I'm interested to see how they respond on the second half of the season, but otherwise, I think the ship seems to have been righted with this group.
Yeah, I agree entirely, and I think it's a really exciting time in a season that started disastrously. Right, I think you can now look at this team and see very clearly that they're a contender. I don't know if I'm not going to say they're a favorite at this point because the pride and the current exist, and I think they're the favorites. It's not a hot take. Look at the table, but I mean, would it be surprising at all if the Thorns were in a place by the end of the season where they were favorites? No, it wouldn't be. And that's based on some really, really good work that they've put in over the course of the last couple of months. You're absolutely right that they're going to have to manage the Olympic window like everybody is and reintegrating. Hopefully it won't be quite as taxing a tournament as the World Cup is. It's just like fundamentally not quite as taxing, even though the rosters are absurdly small. You get to take like 8 players. It's ridiculous. You basically you get to take a game day squad to the entire Olympics. Like the whole tournament, you get one game day squad. Very dumb. But so they're going to have to manage that. But everybody's going to have to manage that to some extent or another. And I think if you're the Thorns and you're looking at a game like this game against the Reign, that gives you a little bit of confidence that you can manage games and that you can get results even when you don't necessarily have your first choice players. So frankly, in some respects, look, Sophia Smith's going to play a lot of minutes at the Olympics. You're going to have some of these key players playing a lot of minutes at the Olympics. Is it the worst thing in the world? And obviously, you want Smith for a rivalry game, like a game at the Reign, right? That is your first choice. Is there a silver lining that you save a couple bullets? Yeah, probably is.
And she used the time to get engaged to Michael Wilson, so congrats to the two of them.
That's not the lining is not the only thing that's silver or diamond. It was all right.
Big diamond. Big diamond.
Sophia Smith, like, yeah. She's one of the most prominent athletes in the United States right now.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's a silver lining for sure. If you're the Thorns, and so I think you could pretty easily walk away from that result, especially saying, all right, no harm, no foul. They didn't walk away from that result entirely saying no harm, no foul. And so if we want to get into the clown show made in Portland segment of this podcast, I think we were there. You're the facts man, so why don't you go ahead and set up the facts?
For sure. So got it in front of me right now, so I make sure not to get the language incorrect on this decision. So the NWSL's independent review panel, this is a group of individuals. I don't know who's on it. I don't know if anybody knows who's on it, if it's anonymous. But anyway, they are the...
It is. So if it's similarly structured to MLS, it's usually a combination of league people, folks from like the referees. It's usually like a kind of a committee of an amalgamation of all the stakeholders that you would think.
Sure. And that would make sense, especially given the response here, which seems in many ways and has been viewed by many as protecting the league first and foremost. But we'll get into the complexity and the detail of it. But anyway, this independent review panel, they denied the appeal of the Thorns for Sophia Smith's red card. Now, circling back, Soph got a red card in stoppage time at the end of the North Carolina Courage game. One of the funniest things I've ever seen on a soccer field, but nonetheless a well earned, I think, red card in that situation, because she earned her second yellow for time wasting in a moment that there wasn't a whole lot of time left to begin with, and the time wasting was, it seemed, and we don't want to ascribe intent because Soph herself has not spoken on this issue, but it seemed pretty clear on TV that she was horsing around and she got the ball and quote unquote accidentally knocked it under the bench, to presumably hide it and waste a little more time than otherwise would have been wasted.
So
Chesky gives her second yellow, and that was the red card that the Thorns were appealing in this case. And Chris will make his point, and we'll circle back to.
Yeah, I'll stop you right there because let's just talk about the red card.
Mm-hmm.
So delaying a restart can get you a yellow card. It's one of the most commonly issued yellow cards in soccer, right? You see it, if not in every game, then in every other game. It happens all the time. I think if you've got two eyes and a brain and you watch that video, there's not a lot to say about it. Like was she delaying the restart? Yes. I mean, using common sense, was she trying to delay the restart? Yes. It was a little bit of gamesmanship, which I want to like step back because like I think there have been some folks who have been like, oh, what is she thinking? And this honestly drives me crazy because it's the kind of thing that if it happened in a men's game, we would just be like, yeah, that's a yellow card. Okay, all right. Like, shouldn't have done that in that moment. I mean, it's just like these are competitive athletes. They're professional athletes. They're competitive moments, and sometimes in competitive moments, you do things that aren't like
stuff
probably
like
the
this.
wisest.
Stuff like this is guaranteed to happen in the Euros. Stuff like this.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
it happens all the time in the men's game.
It's like when a dude rips off his shirt after scoring a goal, and you're like, well, in the grand scheme of things, is that the smartest thing to do? No, but like, big moment, competitive athlete. All right, I'm not like it's not that big of a deal, and the sanction for it is also very clear, right? You get a yellow card. and so I mean, like, to me, like, I lose no sleep over and I'm totally nonplussed by Soph, making a mental error in a competitive moment, and doing something like that. I lose no sleep over it.
Yeah.
In terms of the yellow card, under the laws as written, obviously justified. I mean, you might say it's a little bit. I think the word I used after the game was mall copy, which, like, yeah, all right, like, fine, but that's definitely not wrong. Like, it's just a little mall copy. Like, all right.
Yeah, like being a mall cop is like part of a referee's job in some situations.
Totally.
And
it's not every referee's job to be the cool RA, right?
No, and some referees are much more inclined to behave in such a way than others, and there are people around the league that talk about Chesky as having that reputation. Whether or not she does, that's up to the beholder. But at any rate, Soph gets that card. She serves her suspension against the Reign. At that point, we think, okay, this whole
done
saga,
and dusted. Okay,
saga is over. And then yesterday, this is Tuesday the 18th, the review panel that we spoke about earlier announced that there, in fact, was an appeal of that red card. I joked on Twitter that there would be an appeal of the S-word housery that occurred in that moment. Joked because I didn't think that the Thorns would seriously entertain an appeal.
That's spit housery, by the way, for the children listening in.
Indeed. And the Thorns did. The where this moment turned was the Thorns decided to appeal this red card, and under NWSL rules, if that appeal is determined frivolous, then the punishment doled out is doubled, which is a big deal in this case because the independent review panel determined that the Thorns indeed were frivolous in their appeal, and Portland forfeits a $10,000 bond, which every team in NWSL has to put up at the start of a season as basically collateral for if they do something like this. And they lost that. So RIP $10,000. And now, more importantly,
Could have catered a wedding for that amount.
Yeah. Yes. could absolutely could add some good food for your guests, depending on the guest count for 10 G's. And the bigger one for the team is that the Thorns lose a right to appeal any other red card decisions or decisions period based on this language for the remainder of the current season and for the 2025 season, including the playoffs for both years. Now, the original decision from the review panel was that the suspension for Smith and the undisclosed fine that she was issued would be doubled as well. But the players' union stepped in and appealed that.
Finally, the good guys show up.
Sort of ridiculous to punish the player for something that we don't know necessarily how involved she was in that appeals process. Probably not much at all. It was more of an organizational decision, would be my guess. But she's no longer doubled on that, so she will play on Sunday. She won't get the doubled fine, whatever that number is. She can afford it, whatever. She doesn't care. But that's taken away, and so the two things to focus on for the Thorns are that they forfeit that bond, which obviously any amount of money you lose that you could put towards your organization and you don't have it, that sucks. But the bigger one is that they can't even appeal anything for 2 years because they appealed something that folks, when discussing this, have made 2 points. One, the appeal itself maybe shouldn't have happened in the first place because it was inherently frivolous to appeal something that was caught on camera. It was the Sistine
Chapel of frivolous appeals.
And then
it was Michelangelo's David of frivolous appeals. It was the Angkor Wat of frivolous appeals. It was the pyramids of Giza of pyramids appeals, the Colossus of Rhodes of frivolous appeals. This is the dumbest thing you could possibly appeal. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me?
That's a big point. that's one of the 2 big points, and the other one being that people think the league overstepped. But let's touch on that first one first. The Colossus, as you pointed out, this to me just as somebody on the outside speaking objectively, this seems like a bad move on the Thorns' part to have appealed this in the first place because they run the risk of that appeal being viewed as frivolous because everybody and their mother saw this.
They run the certainty of the appeal being ruled frivolous.
Everybody saw it on TV, man. I was at a sports bar and people were laughing at her hiding the ball. It's so obvious. Anyway, go ahead.
I'm just baffled. Who thought this was a good idea? This is I understand if you're like, oh, come on, don't give her a yellow card for that. But that's not an argument. I don't get it. It was an obvious yellow card. Your best argument, your only argument is, oh, come on.
Yeah, that's what we were doing. We were memeing it afterwards.
Yeah.
I literally said, I was like, they shouldn't give a yellow card for something that's funny. That's funny to say on Twitter.
Maybe they copied your tweet and included it in their appeal because that's the best I can come up with.
If so, right? I'm very sorry that it was my fault. But
come on. So first of all, I do want to make the point that I actually don't think what they lost here is all that significant. These kinds of appeals are actually pretty rare. And so there is probably a better than even chance that there wouldn't have been another incident in the next year and a half that they would have appealed.
Yeah, but 2 years.
And a big part of that, frankly, is that there just aren't that many red cards given in NWSL. There's been a season or two where there's been 1 red card issued the entire year.
Would that not apply to yellows as well?
Even with second yellows, and I don't think you can appeal just a standalone yellow card unless it's something as blatant as misidentification, that they got the player wrong. And so these appeals, frankly, are just pretty rare. These procedures are pretty rare, and so losing that for a year and a half, I mean, it could be significant, right? If there was another sort of, not another, if there was a sort of really significant major error that was going to result in a player being out for a game that they shouldn't be out for, a significant game in the playoffs, something like that. If they, if something like that comes up, yeah, this will end up being a major blunder. But the chances of that, frankly, are not super big, especially in the VAR era. Right. That there are other mechanisms now to catch these sorts of clear and obvious errors, which is what these kinds of appeals are for. And to remedy them on the spot rather than having to go through an appeals process. And so I actually think losing that isn't quite as big of a deal as it maybe looks on paper. But so, I'll start there. Frankly, the thing that gives me the greatest heartburn about this isn't even that. It's, I mean, to, maybe invoke something you said at the very top of the show, it's the concern that the Thorns might be a little high on their own supply. And thinking that this was even a good idea in the first place. First of all, apparently the rules about doubling the suspension of Sophia Smith, which, by the way, if that had stood, that would have been a major blunder by the Thorns. And I think that was rightly, rescinded, and good on the PA for pushing back against that. Why would you punish the player for something like this? It's ridiculous. But so, I mean, the rules about, losing your right to appeal and, losing the bond and all that stuff apparently were in the league manual.
Yeah, they're written explicitly in the league manual. So
nobody can claim like surprise, like, oh, we just thought this was like sending an email. No, like these rules were there. Whether they're stupid rules or not, you can have that conversation, but they were there. They were knowable. I can't say whether or not they were known by the Thorns, but they were knowable. And they put in what it was the Sistine Chapel of frivolous appeals. Anyway, I mean, and look, there has been, I very much had a feeling about the Timbers for a long time, that one of their biggest organizational weaknesses is that they have not always had people within the organization who are willing to sort of push back against kind of some of the narratives that you hear that might not necessarily be reflected in a lot of reality. And I think there have been times when that has yielded very tangible bad results for the Timbers. I think there have been times where that's made them slower to change than they should have been on issues. And sometimes those are little tactical things within a season. Sometimes those are larger. But it's important. It's just like an organizational health thing to have people within an organization who feel empowered when somebody's, maybe going off on a little bit of a tangent on something, who feel empowered to say, hey, hold on. Wait a minute. Like, I don't think this is a good idea. Like, maybe we shouldn't do this. And letting something get like this, get all the way sort of through the, approval structure that it would need to go to the league to submit this appeal, suggests that the Thorns might not have that kind of check within their organization too. And I don't know if that's because there are people saying, hey, wait a minute, maybe this isn't the most meritorious appeal. And they're just not being listened to, or if there's nobody saying that at all. But whichever one of those things it is, it's a problem. And this is a problem that the Timbers had and have had for a while. It's a problem that the Thorns would do well to leave on that part of the sale, on that side of things, because it's just an organizational health thing. And there are going to be circumstances where there are going to be higher stakes decisions to be made. And if your decision-making structure is so weak that it's producing decisions as shambolic as this, you have a lot of reason to be concerned about whether that decision-making structure is going to be strong enough to make the right decisions in those more critical moments. And so that's the thing that I think is, if you're a Thorns fan, more concerning, because this is just a baffling one, right? I mean, this is nobody would think that this is an appeal that is going to get anywhere. And I think basically everybody would have to acknowledge this is a completely frivolous appeal of a yellow card that was given for delaying a restart, because it was. She was delaying a restart. Like, whether she intended to or not, even the referee's interpretation that she was intentionally delaying the restart was at least like a reasonable interpretation from a person who's not able to be in Sophia Smith's head. Even if you want to start talking about, no, she was trying to gather the ball to throw it back in and it slipped and all that stuff, which, like, I don't know, anybody with two eyes and a little bit of common sense can have a lot of skepticism of. But like, even if you want to pedal that line, which the Thorns kind of soft pedaled, like, you still would have to say there's no grounds for appeal here because, like, come on. And so, like, what this says about the organizational strength within the soccer side of the Thorns operation is, to me, the bigger concern. Because when you see just wildly ridiculous decisions like this coming out, that's a concern.
Ending on a high note, once again, congratulations to Soph and Michael Wilson. they are now engaged. Arizona Cardinals wide receiver Michael Wilson, former Stanford Cardinal himself. They met at Stanford, fell in love, or actually they knew each other even before Stanford.
Yeah.
And so it's quite a cute little athlete love story that we got rolling there. Congrats to Michael and Soph. I'm gonna finish on that because everything else was a little bit less fun to talk about. But we'll move on to the Timbers as we roll through this last couple of weeks of happenings in Soccer City. Only one game to talk about with the Timbers, and it was scoreless.
Do we have to?
So not a lot to talk about there beyond, I would say, a continuation of a trend for the Timbers. Yeah, a solid point that they got, and then a continuation of their improvement on the defensive end, which was much needed after an absolutely terrible start to the season on that end of the field.
Yeah, solid point. Really bad game. Really bad game. The game against Houston, kind of a fun game. In the week before, the one at home, this was the exact opposite of that. The really bad game. Frankly, a lot of the responsibility for that I hang on St. Louis's shoulders. I mean, it just turned into a hackathon, especially in the second half. And like, sometimes that happens, right? It's not a particularly positive way to play, but like, you look at St. Louis and you're like, well, maybe there's a reason that team has 9 draws. They've drawn over half their games, and maybe it's because they just play unwatchable, bad, ugly soccer. And they don't have a ton of, real attacking intent or talent this year, and so they kind of muck up the game, and that's exactly what happened. And so, in terms of the analysis of that game itself, good point to get. You don't want to give that one away. Great clearance from Claudio Bravo off the line to keep that one, to keep that score line. But I mean, that's what you need to do sometimes. And so, taking the point out of that, I think is neither a result that you would that like, gets you saying the Timbers are back, but also is not one saying getting you saying that they're down in the dumps. I think that's a fine result coming out of that. And now tonight, we're recording on Wednesday morning. Now tonight, I think they've got a much bigger sort of result-oriented game at San Jose.
Yeah, and they had some time off to sort of reset themselves and get ready for that San Jose game. The internationals, of course, were busier than the others, but I think that it's better to have a break at this type of a moment where you're feeling good about yourself, because then you're picking up where you left off and you can get back into training and feel like you keep the ball rolling a little bit, reflect on what has worked, what hasn't, and get yourself ready for this Earthquakes game, which, I believe it was James Pantemis that was interviewed at training this week, said that, they're better than their record. this Earthquakes team is the viewpoint of the Timbers, but
Are they?
I think that's a viewpoint colored by the
I
fact
think
that the Timbers
Oh,
believe
the
they're
Timbers are
better.
better than the record.
Well, they think that the Earthquakes are, but I'm
Oh,
saying
they
that
think the Quakes are. I mean, I don't know if they are. I think the
yeah.
Quakes are pretty bad. I think the Timbers, whether the Timbers are better than the record, we'll see.
Yeah.
I mean,
last 4 games they've been better, but yes, that's. I mean, if they view San Jose that way, maybe they view themselves that way. But this is a prove it thing for the Timbers.
Gotta win this game. Got to be 3 points. San Jose's on short rest. The Timbers are on long rest. San Jose's terrible. I mean, literally barely above half a point per game. They lose more often. They've lost most of their games. Not a plurality, the majority of their games. And so this is one that's got to be 3 points for the Timbers. And I think if we're sitting here talking next week about anything less than that, it's going to be a real disappointment, because this is the kind of game that if you want to have the type of second half of a season to show that you were better than the 1.1 points per game you put up in the first half of the season, you got to win this one. And if you want to make a run at anything meaningful whatsoever, and I don't think getting ninth and sneaking into the play-in game is meaningful, and if you want to make a run at anything that is meaningful and get yourself to a place in the table that you can point at and say, yeah, we did something this year, you got to win this game. And especially as you look at the schedule going forward, the schedule in terms of balance with how the standings have worked out so far this year is pretty balanced. It's almost exactly the same in terms of points per game of opponents in the first half as it is in the second half. Timbers have one or two more home games than away games in the second half. That'll be helpful, but frankly, their home record hasn't been that great. So I'm not sure how helpful that's ultimately going to be. But they're going to have to prove it. And if you're not getting points from games against the lowly San Jose Earthquakes, you're probably a 1.1 point per game team, and that ain't shoot.
Yeah, and these road games against the lower tier opponents are important, right? Because the Timbers going into Leagues Cup in July have 4 of 6 games at home. And then coming out of Leagues Cup in August, they have 3 straight. So that's 7 of 9 games at home.
And then they run a gauntlet in September.
Yeah, and September
that's going to be the make or break month.
Yeah, so this is one of those games that, you're expecting yourself to get the points at home, even against the better opponents, because it's Providence Park. You want to establish that comfortability there over this 9-game stretch, and it's essential in many ways too, because of the stretch that comes after it, right? And that's a long way down. September's a long way from now, but a lot of road games in that month, heading into the final month,
and good opposition. October. And frankly, there's even some good opposition here in the next month or so. And if you're not beating San Jose on the road, you're going to have better teams. You're going to have Minnesota coming to Providence Park. Do you have any confidence that you can beat a good Minnesota team in Providence Park if you can't take care of the Quakes on the road? Answer, no.
Yeah, Vancouver
too. Yeah, a team that frankly I think is worse than the record. I don't think this Vancouver team is all that great. But Vancouver beat the Timbers up in BC, and they're at least a solid team. If you can't take care of San Jose even on the road when you're on long rest and they're on short rest, do you have confidence that you can come back on the weekend 2 days later, 3 days later, and beat the Caps in Providence Park? I don't. And so it's kind of just then you look into July, do you have confidence that you can compete against the RSLs and the LA Galaxies? And I think the answer is heck no. And so, this is one that I kind of see as a game where if you can't win this one, where are the points going to come from to get yourself to a place of respectability? And I just don't know the answer to that if you can't win this game. Now, if you can, and frankly, I'm going to go ahead and resuscitate the old Soccer Made in Portland predictions section. I think the Timbers are going to win tonight. I think they're a better team than the Quakes. I think they're in better form than the Quakes. And so I think they will go and get that 3 points. And if they do, then I think you can sort of keep the conversation of, are they showing now that they are better than the record? I think that conversation rolls on. But if they don't get the 3 points tonight, forget about it.
Yeah, these are the sort of points you absolutely need in this situation. Looking at the injuries for tonight's game, or I guess absences. It's mainly
Other than international stuff, Timbers are
an
pretty ready to roll.
international situation. Yeah, they're pretty okay. So it's Loria's been out all season. Crepeau, Miller, and Araujo, all due to international duty, will not be available. But everybody else is there. Evander, the engine, is there. So we'll see how that game turns out tonight. I think they'll win too. I think they're in that sort of form, and having the rest differential is big. Can't lay an egg in this one for sure. One piece that I've seen some small rumblings on that maybe we can touch on with the Timbers is the thought that they might be adding more attacking talent. There's been rumblings of maybe they get a striker, and then it's like, okay, well, then you're really embracing the winger role there, as something that you should utilize players for. But the the name I saw today was kind of crazy. And we can trust these media reports to our peril, but two different outlets in Colombia, which is a place that has been fertile ground for the Timbers. So I'm sure there's folks with a decent amount of sourcing in that department. Two different media sources in Colombia saying that the Timbers are among two MLS teams interested in James Rodriguez, which that's a big name, but is it something that is necessarily worth spending what would probably be a lot of money on? I don't know. That's the only, at least, specific name we've seen. It's a rumor. It's nothing to truly, sink your teeth into. But I think the general vibe of the rumor milling is that they're pursuing additional attacking talent. So
it doesn't make a lot of sense to me.
You're talking about James Rodriguez specifically.
I mean, that makes no sense to me. Okay. That makes no sense to me whatsoever. But pursuing more attacking talent, look, I mean, this team scored 32 goals through the first 18 games of the season. That's pretty good. That's actually better than pretty good. That's really good. There's a ton of attacking talent on this team already. They've also conceded 32 goals through the first 18 games of the season. That's pretty bad. In fact, that's not pretty bad. That's really bad. And so, I mean, like, don't overthink this, right? I mean, if you want to try to be a team that just, says, say hello to my little friend and just tries to, go crazy with attacking output, fine. How many of those teams win trophies? Very few. If you want to win trophies, defend. Like, you need to be good in terms of attack, but I think the Timbers are there. They could win trophies with this attack that they have right now.
So should they spend on a defensive player? I mean, what would be the alternative then to sort of
I'd be looking for either a two-way or a holding midfielder, central midfielder, to reinforce the spine. I actually think they've thrown some resources. I think they've got personnel for the most part in terms of central defense, which is the other place that you would spend significant money. In terms of a depth move, I think you probably go and find a little bit more depth in at fullback as well. But I would really look to reinforce the spine, because I think that's a lot of where this team has struggled, both in terms of keeping possession and not giving the ball away in dangerous positions, but also in terms of just maintaining their structure. If I were to go make a significant signing, that's where I'd be putting my money. I especially wouldn't be using a full senior DP spot on an attacking player. That would be absolutely insane, given what they would be giving up, the opportunity cost of doing that, the $2 million in GAM, given that they'd have 3 committed senior DPs. I mean, the opportunity cost would be enormous to going and adding something that is a luxury piece for a team that's got non-luxury needs, that needs to address the staples, right? And if you're going out buying champagne when you don't have bread, you're going to get drunk, but you're not going to get much done. And the Timbers need some solidity right now. And I think it's a little bit of a difficult issue to address midseason. I mean, I acknowledge that, but I mean, if you're going out and making another major attacking signing, you're fixing you're fixing something that ain't broke when you got a team that's got some stuff that's broke.
Yeah, and the issue too is that, you know, in flashes and for some players more than others, you've seen quality out of people at those positions that you're
So go
talking
get
about, right?
more out of it
Yeah,
from
so
Indy.
go get more
out of it
or
from Sandy
get a
Moreno.
star fullback or get somebody that can, you know, be a dynamic difference maker in those spaces. But I mean, David Ajala, they've been excited about lately. You know, Chara is definitely, it seemed at this point in his career, taken a bit of a step back. But Christian Paredes has done very well over the last couple of years. Where does Eric Williamson factor in? It's certainly, I mean, when we're talking about holding midfielders and central midfielders, it's certainly a crowded position group in terms of names that people know. But like, are we to a point now where you have this surplus of you know, potential and sometimes and relatively consistent contributors mixed together, that maybe you trade somebody, maybe you go a different direction to make some room for new blood that might assist you in that area of the field? That's definitely a question. I think that as currently constructed, um, you know, the Timbers have improved, no doubt, over the last 4 games, but as currently constructed, I don't think that this exact iteration of the roster is going to cut it for what they have ambition to do. They've talked about wanting to win trophies, and of course, every single team talks about wanting to win trophies. Every coach,
every single team wants
gets
to win
hired,
trophies.
everybody wants to, but and based on the amount of investment that Merritt Paulson has made in this roster, it seems very, which is a lot.
He's not paying for a 9th place team.
No, he's not paying for a team that's middle of the table. So they are expecting more out of this group, and if that means some tweaks, some hard goodbyes, then, you know, more power to it. But we'll see how it shakes out.
Here's the other thing, though. I caution against thinking that the solution is entirely external. It's not. There's got to be a lot of internal solutions with players, coaches currently here that need to happen to make the team, you know, worthy of what's been paid for it. And so, you know, I think if there are smart moves to be made, obviously you need to go ahead and make those. But if you're hanging your hat on the second half of the season on making those moves, you're probably headed to an unhappy place. Because look, I mean, you know, it could going out and making a big signing in the attack lead to sort of a net kind of addition of a few goals over sort of the replacement value, possibly, but that's not what they need to address. That's not been the problem. And so, you know, if you're hanging your hat on that of, oh, we're one winger away, you know, you need what the Thorns needed when they submitted that appeal. You need somebody in the organization saying, I don't know if that's really it. Because that's not it. They're not one winger away. They're a more cohesive team. They're a team with a clearer identity. They're a more organized team. And they're a team that probably needs a little bit more reinforcement in their spine away from being the team that I think they should be.
That game against the Earthquake, 7:30 p.m. tonight. We will be checking that one out. Of course, today is Wednesday when we're recording this pod, so if you're listening on Thursday, we apologize. We did not have any reactions this week to that San Jose game, but we will next time, as the Timbers and Thorns continue to roll along in their season. Of course, the Thorns.
Also, we're recording on Juneteenth, so
We are.
a shout, you know, a very happy and meaningful Juneteenth to everybody out there. You know, it's a really significant holiday. It is the day that that a lot of people were liberated from the worst thing that this country and a lot of civilizations around the world have ever done. certainly one of the worst things that folks, so that countries around the world have ever done in enslaving other people. That today was the end of it. It's not to say that we've arrived and that everything is solved, but it was, it's a really significant day in terms of the commitment of building a more perfect union, and striving toward equality for everybody in the country. And so it's an important day to celebrate and to reflect on. So a happy and meaningful Juneteenth to everybody out there.
Absolutely. Happy Juneteenth, everybody listening and watching on YouTube. Everybody out there joining us this week. Happy Juneteenth. The Juneteenth celebration actually for the Timbers is going to be their game on Saturday, since they're on the road tonight. So they'll play the Whitecaps on Saturday, and there'll be celebrations around that. And then Sunday's Thorns game, 1 p.m. against the Current. A nice little afternoon matinee for you on what's going to be a pretty toasty weekend here in the Rose City. So if you got your portable air conditioners, you might want to dust them off, because it's going to get a little warm starting today. So that's been your weather made in Portland.
Fortunately, Sunday's looking a little cooler.
Yeah, Sunday should be a little cooler than today through Saturday-ish. But yeah, I'll be down in Eugene next couple of weekends
for the trials.
That's going to be some exciting
primer,
stuff.
Ducks oriented primer for the trials, written by Ryan Timothy Clark on OregonLive.com. Dang it, you're not supposed to spoil that. This was a whole bit I had with Jamie back in the day, where she, like you, had the middle initial and the Twitter handle, and so I'd just make something up every week as to what the B stood for. I was trying to do it with the T, but you blew it. It's Thomas, so, everybody.
I'm supposed to let you lie about my name.
That's
okay,
right.
That's
fine.
Right.
Go check that out. The Olympic trials are super cool for track and field.
Yeah,
they're super cool. It's a really fun event. I've been down a couple times in the past. It's a really, really neat event. It's really good TV. But it's even better when you're there in stadium, because like the stakes are so enormously high and you can feel that energy, that it's awesome. So enjoy covering that. It's a really fun event, I think, to cover. And if you can, tune in.
For sure. 29 Ducks current and former in that Olympic trials over the next couple of weeks. So you can check that primer out, as Chris plugged, on OregonLive.com. More features and stories to come throughout the weekends on local athletes with Oregon ties. So myself and Nick Dash will be taking care of that, along with Ken Go, a local legend in the sports writing area. So keep an eye on Oregon Live for all that coverage, for continual coverage from Tyson Alger and Shane Hoffman on the Timbers and Thorns side. They've been doing a great job lately with different check-ins, different features on the I-5 corridor, and also posted through Oregon Live. So shout out to Shane and Tyson. They're podding a little bit on soccer. We've got some pod buddies on the I-5 corridor, so good to see that. More content on soccer in this city is always better. So very excited to continue to read that. Subscribe wherever you get your pods to Oregonian Sports Podcast Network. That'll have this one, Ducks Confidential, Beaver Banter, Blazers Focused, all the good ones, and then of course the Oregonian Sports Podcast, hosted by Bill Oram.
We're not allowed to talk about him this week.
But
we're on Bill Oram probation.
Well, we just said his name twice, so that's too bad. And then of course Brenna Green joining Bill on that podcast and lending her voice, much needed in the local sports landscape. So keep an eye out for all those pods and for ours. We will see you next time. Thanks for joining us.